The last ferry of the night had already disappeared into the darkness by the time I understood that my husband wasn't coming back for me. It was 11:47 p.m. on New Year's Eve. The cold at the Edmonds Ferry Terminal was brutal. Wind swept off Puget Sound, carrying the smell of salt and diesel, while fireworks flashed somewhere across the water towards Seattle. People were counting down to midnight in warm homes and crowded parties. I was standing alone on the platform with 2 heavy suitcases and a box of gifts I'd spent 3 evenings choosing for my husband's family. I'd just returned from Chicago after a corporate audit that was supposed to last 10 days but stretched into 14. I'd missed Christmas with my family. I'd missed dinner with my mother-in-law, Judith. I'd missed all those ordinary moments that quietly hold a marriage together. Before leaving O'Hare, I'd texted my husband, Conrad, my arrival time. His response had been simple. Got it. I assumed he'd pick me up. For a moment, he did. His silver BMW pulled into the loading zone just as I dragged my luggage down the ramp. My heart actually lifted when I saw him. After 2.5 years of marriage, some part of me still reacted that way whenever I saw his car. I waved. He didn't. Instead, he lowered the window only a few inches. I can't stay, he said, staring at his phone. Henderson called. Emergency meeting. I stopped. Conrad, it's almost midnight. Big clients, you know how it is. His voice was cold and distracted, like he had already moved on. Just grab an Uber. I'll send you the money. Then I noticed the passenger seat. A pale blue cashmere scarf was draped over the headrest. It wasn't Judith's color. It wasn't anyone's scarf I recognized. Before I could ask, Conrad's phone buzzed. He immediately turned it face down. The app works fine out here, he said. Then the window closed. I had been sick since Chicago. I had a fever of 102 degrees, and after 7 hours of traveling, my entire body felt exhausted. Conrad, please, just take me part of the way. I'm sorry. But he didn't look sorry, he looked annoyed. His BMW pulled away, and the tire hit a puddle of slush, spraying freezing water over my coat and boots. I stood there watching his taillights disappear. My phone was at 4%. The first person I called was my friend Blythe. She answered immediately. New Year's Eve, she said. You better have a good reason. Conrad left me at the ferry terminal. I whispered. I need a ride, and I think I'm getting worse. There was a brief silence. Then Blythe said, Tell me exactly where you are. That was the last thing I remembered clearly. I woke up in Blythe's apartment in Queen Anne to the smell of chicken broth and the quiet sound of a podcast playing in the kitchen. My head felt heavy. My throat hurt so badly that swallowing was difficult. Blythe appeared in the doorway. You're awake. I tried to sit up. She immediately stopped me. Slowly, you have pneumonia. I stared at her. The doctor came on day 3. Day 3? My voice barely came out. How long have I been here? She raised both hands. 10 fingers. 10 days. I'd been at Blythe's apartment for 10 days, drifting in and out of consciousness while fighting a serious lung infection. I reached for my phone. The first thing I checked was the call history. My mother had called twice. A coworker had called about the audit. Had called repeatedly, but Conrad? Nothing. No missed calls, no text, no voicemail. Not even a simple question asking whether I'd made it home safely. 10 days. My husband hadn't once tried to find me. I placed the phone face down. Something inside me became very still. Not peaceful, not accepting. Just still. Don't call him, I said. Blythe looked at me. Miriam, I want to see how long it takes. It took 2 more days. On day 12, at exactly 9 in the morning, Conrad finally called. His voice sounded casual. Hey, you doing okay? I've been swamped. Not where are you? Not I've been worried. Not why didn't you call, just I've been swamped. I told him about the pneumonia. I told him I'd stayed with Blythe. I told him I'd needed IV antibiotics for several days. He responded with a dull, wow, that's rough. Then he asked when I'd be coming home. Soon, I answered. After I ended the call, Blythe stood in the kitchen doorway. 12 days. I didn't respond. He waited 12 days and didn't even ask how you got from the ferry terminal to here. He didn't ask, I said. Then I opened her laptop. I'd spent years working as a financial analyst. I knew how to read documents. I knew how to follow money. And most importantly, I knew how to recognize when something legitimate was being used to hide something else. Conrad and I shared a family Tesla account. Vehicle's location history was stored automatically. I'd never checked it. I'd trusted him. Now I checked. The map showed his car repeatedly visiting the same building on Melrose Avenue. 11 times in 2 months. Some visits lasted 2 hours, others lasted 3. Tuesday lunches, late evenings. And one Sunday morning when he'd told me he was at the office finishing a proposal, I pulled up the statements for his secondary credit card. He'd always said it was for client expenses. I believed him. Then I found something, $4,200 at a high-end Seattle jeweler. A few weeks later, $3,800 at a furniture boutique located only blocks from the Melrose building. Those weren't client expenses. Then I remembered something. A few days earlier, I'd found a small black key fob in one of Conrad's old jackets. He'd asked me to search the pocket for an insurance card. I'd assumed the fob belonged to a storage unit. Now I put it in my bag, and I went to the building. The lobby was quiet. I followed another resident into the elevator and pressed different floors until the fob reader flashed green. Unit 1104. The door opened. I stepped inside, and my entire understanding of my marriage collapsed. The apartment was decorated in rose gold and cream. There were candles everywhere, soft, blush-colored pillows, photographs covering the walls. And Conrad. Conrad was in almost every photograph, but he wasn't alone. He was with a blonde woman I'd never seen before. They were laughing together on the Oregon coast, having dinner, standing close. His hand rested comfortably on her back. Then I saw something that hurt more than the photographs. He was genuinely happy. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him laugh like that with me. On the kitchen counter were prenatal vitamins and a pregnancy book. My stomach dropped. Then I saw an open planner. The handwriting was unmistakable. Conrad's handwriting. Nursery. Tiffany wants sage green. Crib, white oak, Tiffany. I was still trying to process it when I noticed a bank statement clipped to the refrigerator. It was for an LLC, Meridian Nest Properties. The account was in Conrad's name. The opening deposit was $400,000. I photographed everything. The statement, the planner, the photographs, the vitamins. Then I heard the elevator, footsteps, a man's voice. Conrad, my blood went cold. I rushed into the bedroom closet and pulled the door almost shut. A moment later, Conrad entered the apartment with the blonde woman. Tiffany, she said, you keep telling me to wait. Her voice sounded young. I'm 24 weeks, Conrad. I'm showing. My coworkers are asking questions. 24 weeks. 6 months pregnant. I stood frozen inside the closet. Then Conrad spoke. 3 more months. His voice was calm, controlled. The same voice he'd used at our breakfast table countless times. I'm finishing the transfer into Meridian Nest. Once the firm's assets are moved into the LLC, the marital estate will be worth a fraction of what it actually is. I couldn't breathe. She'll get 10% of what's declared. Maybe $150,000. Tiffany asked something I couldn't hear. Conrad laughed quietly. She's practical. She's a numbers person. Give her a number and she'll calculate that fighting legally costs more than it's worth. Then came the sentence that changed everything. She'll take it and go back to Ohio. I felt my jaw tighten. My phone was already recording. I waited until they moved toward the kitchen. Then I slipped out of the apartment. I didn't run. I walked into the stairwell, sat on a concrete step, and looked at the recording indicator on my screen. For the first time since the ferry terminal, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt awake. The next morning, I met Malcolm, an attorney in Pioneer Square. He listened to the recording without changing expression. When it ended, he placed his pen on the desk. Depending on how these transfers are structured, this could be much more serious than a difficult divorce. He paused. We may be looking at financial fraud. We'll need a forensic accountant. I know someone. I gave him the name of Delia, an auditor I'd worked with in Chicago. She was meticulous, quiet, and very good at finding money people didn't want discovered. Malcolm looked at me. Here's what you do. Go home. I frowned. Act exactly as you have been acting. Why? Because Conrad thinks you're unaware. He explained that his firm's 15th anniversary gala was coming up. Conrad's board cared deeply about appearances. A public divorce involving the company's CEO could create problems for investors. That gala, Malcolm said, is our window. That evening, I drove home. Before walking through the front door, I sat in my car and practiced my expression in the rearview mirror. I needed to look normal, not angry, not suspicious, not broken, just normal. Conrad was relieved to see me. He pretended to worry about my health. He touched my shoulder. He asked whether I wanted soup. He believed I was still the same Miriam he'd abandoned at the ferry terminal. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him had already begun dismantling the story he'd built. A few days later, he gave me $4,000 to buy a dress for the gala. Next morning, I transferred the money to Malcolm's legal retainer. Then I received a message from an unknown number. This is Rowan, Conrad's brother. I think we should talk. I'd met Rowan only twice. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in Fremont. The resemblance between the brothers was obvious. Same jaw, same eyes. But the similarities ended there. Conrad walked into rooms as if he owned them. Rowan seemed like someone who had learned not to take up too much space. He placed a thick folder on the table. Our father left his estate to both of us equally. I looked at the folder. Conrad forged documents while I was living in Portland. He had spent 3 years trying to prove it. Bank records, handwriting analysis, notarized documents. Then he showed me something else. Records of 2 LLCs Conrad had been secretly funding for 18 months. One of them was Meridian Nest. I need someone who was on the inside, Rowan said. My testimony alone isn't enough. Yours could be. I thought about Conrad's words in the closet. She'll take it and go back to Ohio. He had believed that so completely. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness. "What do you need from me?" I asked. The gala was held at the Olympic Hotel ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung above white linen tables. A tribute video played near the entrance, showing Conrad at ribbon cuttings, awards ceremonies, and corporate events. The perfect image of a successful CEO. Young, confident, untouchable. I arrived wearing a black blazer dress I'd purchased with my own money. I'd cut my hair to my chin. Conrad noticed something was different, but he couldn't figure out what. Tiffany arrived 40 minutes after the cocktail hour began. She was listed as a junior associate. She stayed close to Conrad, close enough that several people at nearby tables began noticing. Conrad seemed oblivious, or perhaps he simply didn't care. Then the dinner ended. The room prepared for formal remarks. I excused myself, but I didn't go for another drink. I went to the AV booth. Gil was waiting. He knew exactly what was about to happen. I walked toward the microphone at the edge of the stage. Someone handed me a glass, assuming I was about to make a toast. Across the room, Conrad looked up. He smiled. That familiar smile. The smile of a man who expected praise. I looked at him. Then I turned toward the audience. 15 years. The room became silent. That's a remarkable achievement. Conrad's smile widened. I wanted to share something with all of you tonight that I believe says more about what Conrad has built than any award ever could. The lights dimmed. The enormous LED screen behind me came alive and the first photograph appeared. Conrad. The blonde woman. The apartment. Then another. The pregnancy book. The prenatal vitamins. The LLC statement. The room went completely silent. Conrad's smile disappeared. I heard someone whisper his name. Then the screen changed again. A bank document appeared. Then another. Transfers, accounts, dates, amounts. Every transaction Delia and Malcolm had uncovered. Conrad stood frozen. "What is this?" someone demanded. I didn't answer. The next screen showed the evidence from Rowan's case. Forged documents, estate records, financial transfers, a pattern stretching back years. Then Gil played the audio. Conrad's own voice filled the ballroom. "Once the firm's assets are moved into the LLC, the marital estate will be worth a fraction of what it actually is." Nobody moved. Then his voice continued. "She'll take it and go back to Ohio." I looked directly at him. "No, Conrad." He stared at me. "I won't." The ballroom erupted. Board members stood. Executives began whispering. Someone called security. Tiffany looked terrified, and Conrad finally understood. He hadn't abandoned a helpless wife at a ferry terminal. He had created the one person capable of exposing him, me. The woman he'd dismissed as practical. The woman he'd assumed would quietly accept whatever number he offered. The woman he believed would simply disappear. He was wrong, completely wrong. And as I stood beneath the chandeliers, listening to the people around him, finally asked the questions I'd been asking myself for weeks, I realized something. The ferry terminal hadn't been the moment my life fell apart. It had been the moment I stopped pretending my marriage was still standing. Conrad thought leaving me alone in the freezing cold was the end of my story. It was only the beginning. Because sometimes the person who underestimates you the most is the person who gives you the greatest advantage. And sometimes the coldest night of your life is the night you finally learn how warm freedom can feel.